Welcome back, everybody, to the Winning Drive podcast. I am Reeta Hubbard, the NFL chick, co-host of the Glenn and Reeta Show on 105.7 The Fan, with my guy, Cordell Woodland from Shaking It Up Sports and the Ravens reporter for 105.7 The Fan. And week 3, Cordell, let's move along. After that huge win against Cincinnati, the Ravens are hoping to keeping the momentum going on week 3 as they host the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the weather. I have a little bit. But apparently there's some like nor'easter brewing in the Atlantic. And so there's potentially going to be some high winds and rain from Friday to Sunday, which I would think would be impactful for this game. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely make an impact. I still think if it is ugly weather, I think that would be to the Ravens' advantage. They want to run the ball anyway.
Yeah.
But kind of so does Indianapolis. And they're in a situation to where they're trying to figure out who's even going to be playing quarterback for them on Sunday with Anthony Richardson in the concussion protocol, Gardner Minshew being the backup, who's a proven vet. I mean, I think that they feel comfortable if Gardner Minshew does have to go out there. But yeah, the weather could definitely be an impact. As I'm looking at it now, it looks like maybe by 1 o'clock, the rain should be gone. But the winds could still be a factor. So yeah, we'll definitely see how that impacts it.
So let's start with the Ravens defense against the Colts offense, since you mentioned Anthony Richardson. Again, like you mentioned, he did not practice on Wednesday because he is in concussion protocol. Another person that is in concussion protocol is their center. I believe his name is Nick Kelly. He is in concussion protocol as well. So that is something to watch, losing your starting quarterback and your starting center. You mentioned how this could go into the Ravens' favor. And obviously, I think that this is huge in terms of Jonathan Taylor not being there because he is on the PUP list, which means he is not able to play the first 4 weeks of the season. So now you're potentially without your starting quarterback who does know how to run the ball, right? And would be really good in this type of weather. And also you don't have your top running back. Oh yeah, and by the way, your center potentially is out as well. So this definitely feels like this is the Ravens game here, right? The Indianapolis Colts play in a dome. So they don't necessarily, I believe it has a retractable roof, but either way, when the weather gets bad, they can close it in and they don't have to deal with that type of weather. We know that M&T Bank Stadium is an open stadium, so they deal with all types of weather, winter, fall, whatever comes their way, which includes torrential rains, something that the Colts are not necessarily, familiar with, right? So from a defensive perspective, it definitely feels like I like Gardner Minshew, by the way. I think that he is a decent backup. We've seen him in action, and I don't think that he's a bad football player by any means. But because of the potential wins that you already mentioned, you got to assume that they're going to be limited in them throwing the ball. And then with you not having your top quarterback that can run and your top running back that is very good, that really ate the Ravens up the last time that they played, that could potentially be a problem going in for the Indianapolis Colts' offense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a lot of injuries to key positions. Your starting quarterback, your starting center, who's one of the better centers in the league at that. Yep. And then your running back's gone. And, he's another one that's one of the better backs in the league. Zach Moss filled in pretty well. He had a good game last week. The Colts offense had a good game last week in general against the Houston Texans. And that includes Anthony Richardson, who was playing well before he got knocked out of that game. So definitely some big blows, but the Ravens are dealing with their own issues on the defensive side of the ball. Dafe Owe is out right now with the ankle injury. I don't feel confident that we're going to see him on the field on Sunday. We'll see. He didn't practice on Wednesday. Jadeveon Clowney, who played a lot on Sunday, he missed practice on Wednesday with an illness. So we'll see if he's able to return at some point this week to practice before Sunday. And you still have the guys who are already out. Marcus Williams is out. Marlon Humphrey didn't practice on Wednesday.
You got to assume he's not playing.
Yeah, I don't expect to see Marlon out there this week. And Michael Pittman had a really good game as well last week. So the Colts are sneaky. The Colts are one of those sneaky teams. You know, you look at them and they're not one of the better teams in the league, no doubt about that. But they are sneaky. I thought Houston would give them problems last week, especially considering the defensive front that we saw when they were in Baltimore. And you look at what the Colts are missing on the offensive side of the ball. I thought that would be a tough matchup for the Colts. But man, they looked pretty explosive on Sunday. Granted, a lot of that was with Anthony Richardson on the field to start, but Gardner Minshew came in and the offense really didn't miss a beat. I mean, they missed out on the athleticism at the quarterback position because obviously there's a huge drop off in athleticism from Anthony Richardson to Gardner Minshew. But what they gain is a guy that has been, that has played games in this league, has won games in this league, has had good games in this league throwing the ball. So I think that they are confident in Gardner Minshew and what he can do in that offense. Shane Steichen, it's a new offense for them, just like it is for the Ravens. And so far, that offense has looked pretty decent out there. So I do think that's going to be something to watch to see if this, even if Gardner Minshew is the starter, and we don't know, Anthony Richardson could be out there by, on Sunday, we'll see. But if he is, that presents a whole nother challenge because now you got to worry about the threat of his legs. And he has shown himself throughout the first 2 weeks of the season. He has a rushing touchdown in each of the first 2 games of the year. So the dude can run the ball. I mean, he is a threat as a runner. This isn't like C.J. Stroud, who can run, but is more reluctant to run. Anthony Richardson is looking to take off, and he's a bigger guy. Lamar was asked just yesterday about Anthony Richardson being called like this hybrid of Cam Newton and Lamar Jackson. I don't know if I'm willing to go that far, but you can definitely see the metrics into what he's been compared to Cam for a while now. I don't know if I necessarily see Lamar in him just because Lamar is on a different level when it comes to mobile quarterback in the open field. I don't know if Richardson is there, but I do think Richardson is a big time threat as a runner. So it will be curious to see which quarterback they put out there. And I think the situation and they always say it, they got to prepare for both. But I do think either of these quarterbacks could potentially have success. Not saying that they will, but they each have their own skill sets to where they could be successful at various points.
I want to correct myself. I said his name was Nick Kelly. It's Ryan Kelly.
Right.
That's my fault. I apologize about that. It's not a secret that I am a Florida Gator fan. So I have had the opportunity to watch Anthony Richardson in college. And I understand the comparisons to Cam, but he's faster than Cam. Like I need to stop saying that. He is more faster than Cam. He's not willing to necessarily run people over the same way as Cam, even though his body type is very similar, but he's not willing to take the hits. He's not necessarily going to do that. He's a smarter runner in that regard. And that might be because of Cam, right? People might have learned how to evolve in terms of running the ball because Cam was when he would run, he run kind of violently. And as a result, he's had some injuries over the years that I think didn't help elongate his career. And I think that, now you got some guys that are being mentored a little bit differently in terms of how they do that. But nonetheless, Anthony Richardson is definitely a threat on the ground. And the one thing I think that does favor the Ravens, let's say he plays hypothetically, because I do think that it's unlikely he plays. With everything that we saw last year with the concussion protocol and the Miami Dolphins with Tua, I have to assume that it's very possible that he doesn't play because the PR for that has been not good, as we know. But let's say that, that he does. The Ravens have an opportunity to say, okay, but we practice against Lamar Jackson every day. We know what it's like to play against a guy that runs the ball on a regular basis. So I think that does favor the Ravens. Again, it doesn't favor them in terms of like body style because Anthony Richardson is bigger. But ultimately, playing against a guy like Lamar Jackson every day does help you sharpen your tools a little bit, because it's somebody that you're already familiar with in terms of style. Gardner Minshew is a different type of situation because he's not the runner that Anthony Richardson can be. He is more of a passer, and so it does shake up things a little bit, right? Because it's not something that they see on a regular basis. You already mentioned Michael Pittman, who is obviously their top receiver. When I look at their roster, I don't know these other two guys. I don't know these other two dudes, Cordell. And so, obviously the game is going to be get Michael Pittman out of his game, because the other two guys, Josh Downs and Alec Pierce. Okay.
Josh Downs, I only know Josh Downs just because I saw a little bit of him in college as well. And he's not Michael Pittman, but he can be a little bit of a vertical threat, and there's a big gap between Michael Pittman and Josh Downs right now. But look, he's the rookie, he's the newcomer, and he's another North Carolina Tar Heel. Yeah. The Tar Heels have kind of been trying to produce some young talent in the NFL the last couple of years.
It's back over there. So yeah.
So I only know a little bit about Josh because I got to watch him in college. But yeah, like, to your point, the drop off from Michael Pittman to the next receiver on the team is drastic. It's drastic. Alec Pierce, the second-year receiver who made some noise last year, really fell off. As the year went on last year, he kind of disappeared, and he hasn't really gotten off to a great start this year. Mo Alley Cox, nothing, is inconsistent at tight end. Kylan Granson has actually been their starting tight end, and I can't really tell you a lot about him. I know he's from SMU. He's got a touchdown already this year, but yeah, it's kind of, it's not a lot that scares you in terms of offensive weapons on that team. But that doesn't mean that they can't hurt you. And I trust that Mike McDonald will have a great game plan in place to be able to contain the Colts as best as possible, because really with them, it's just about, not allowing the big plays, which they did a good job of against Cincinnati. And also just not letting this team catch you by surprise. That's kind of how I look at it right now when it comes to this Colts offense, especially if, like you said, I don't really expect Anthony Richardson to be out there for the reasons you mentioned. I think that they're going to start taking the concussion protocol very seriously, especially at the quarterback position after what we saw with Tua last year. So I'm expecting to see Gardner Minshew out there. And granted, he's probably a little more of a throwing threat than Anthony Richardson right now, even though Richardson has been pretty accurate so far in the league, considering his completion percentage coming out of college was like 50% or something like that. He's been pretty decent as a passer so far, but Gardner Minshew, he's the better passer between the two. So I just think it's a lot of new. It's a lot of new offense. You really don't know what to expect out of the quarterback situation. The backfield is, kind of makeshift right now, but I do like Zach Moss. He has some explosiveness with him. So I just think the Ravens have to be on their P's and Q's in this game. You just don't let them catch you by surprise.
I completely agree with that, because it's very, at the end of the day, you still have to match up. And that's really what it boils down to. Just because we on paper don't love what we see necessarily, especially without Anthony Richardson, doesn't mean that, when the day comes and the matchups come together, that, they won't cause a problem. So we'll see how this goes from an offensive perspective of the Colts against the Ravens on Sunday. Let's flip it to the other side, Cordell. Ravens offense, who has really played well. I know that in the first week there was some rust. Fine. However, they definitely still scored 25 points. I think that that's something that we have to acknowledge, right? And then against the Bengals, they looked really good. They looked in sync. And for the most part, they definitely clicked much better this week than they last week, than they did in week 1 against the Houston Texans. So now you're playing against the Indianapolis Colts. And already, as we mentioned, the weather is potentially a factor. And look, there's some injuries. Justice Hill apparently is dealing with a foot injury, although he is believed to not be serious, and he claims that he'll be ready to go on Sunday. They have then since picked up Kenyon Drake, who was on the Ravens roster last year. They put him on the practice squad. We know Melvin Gordon was activated last week, but I don't recall seeing Melvin Gordon play. So, I mean, I think that they were completely okay with the tandem of Hill and Gus Edwards. But this is a defense that has some names when you start looking. And Kwity Paye is a guy that, you know, you're familiar with. DeForest Buckner is a guy, Shaq Leonard. There's players on this team that you're familiar with on the other side of the ball for the Indianapolis Colts. So, again, look, the offensive line has played really well. And I think particularly against the Bengals last week, who has had strong fronts in the past, over the past few years. And so when you see the guys like Buckner, like Kwity Paye being out there, and you look at what the offensive line was able to do last week, these guys are good players. And I'm not going to sit here and take that away from them at all. But you have to feel comfortable going into this game knowing that this offensive line held their own with two new guys on the line and found a way to make this work. Do you think that it'll be a harder challenge this week against the Indianapolis Colts, or do you expect them to kind of hold their own again this week?
I could see both scenarios, but you look at it historically, especially in the AFC North, when AFC North teams come out of a division game, the next week usually isn't great for them. Just because
that's a valid point.
You know, it's a lot of energy invested in those AFC North matchups. Those games are so physical. And for the Ravens going to Cincinnati, getting that win, I mean, that seemed like a big emotional win for them at the time. Granted, it was only a week 2 game, but it's a division game, and it puts Cincinnati at 0-2 and 0-2 in the division. So it had a lot of meaning to it.
So you thinking it's going to be some? You think it's going to be some coming down a little bit, and that they're going to come out flat? Is that what we're thinking here?
I'm just leaving some room for that. I'm not expecting them to. Okay. But I'm going to leave some room for some early game rust. Not saying that it'll go it'll be bad all game, but it wouldn't shock me if the Ravens offensive line does have their struggles early with this defensive front. The reality is, and I spoke to Lawrence Owen from the Believe podcast. He came on my show on Tuesday, and he said it as well. Look, the strength of that Colts defense is their front seven. Yep. That's what it is. And the Colts know that. So those guys are they understand that if they're going to win, it's going to come through them. And that's when you're going to get those. DeForest Buckner can really wreck games. I mean, that's the type of player that he is. Shaquille Leonard could do the same thing. Zaire Franklin, he's a guy that's been flying all over the field in the first 2 weeks. And
you're able to do that when your front seven is doing what they're supposed to do.
Exactly. So I mean, I am leaving room for that. But I also don't think it's wrong to feel confident in this Ravens front line, considering what we saw them do out in Cincinnati. I mean, Patrick McCarry is a guy that everybody trusts. There's nothing new there. And Sam Mustipher had himself a really good game, and he's a starter in this league anyway. I mean, it wasn't anything new for him going out there on Sunday. So, I mean, there's reasons to be confident in what the Ravens should be able to do on Sunday. I mean, at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson is still back there. Gus Edwards ran the ball well. They spread the ball all over the field, and the Ravens will have the advantages on the perimeters. The front seven may be good, but that secondary is kind of up for grabs right now. That's where the Ravens are going to win the game, I believe, is in their matchups. That's why Zay Flowers could be in line for a big game this week. I honestly believe this could be the best game Zay has had in the early portion of this season come Sunday, because they're going to the Ravens are going to give them a lot of matchup problems. I don't know if I don't think they have a corner group that can guard Zay, that can guard Bateman and Nelson Aguilar when he's out there. Also, Mark Andrews in the middle. I mean, Shaquille Leonard will probably have take on the role of not only watching Mark Andrews, but also trying to put pressure on Lamar. He may be the spy guy at times because he can run. So it's going to be a back and forth situation because I think both sides, while I think the Colts have the advantage in the trenches, I will give them that. I think the Ravens have the advantage on the perimeter. And I think that's what the Ravens want anyway. The Ravens will take that because ideally in this offense, specifically in the passing game, the ball should be coming out of Lamar's hands quick. So that'll be fine. I think running the ball, they can run the ball in their sleep. And if I'm not mistaken, isn't the Colts the team that Lamar had the over 500 yards of total offense against?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, not to say that history will repeat itself on Sunday, but he has had, they've had success against the Colts in the past. And I don't see why this week will be any different, but I will acknowledge that the Colts front seven is legit.
I agree with that. I definitely think that this is a Todd Monken game, I think. And I say that because with the weather being unpredictable at this point, because the storm is supposed to be moving out, but in moving out, it's potentially supposed to be windy, right? And I think that I say this is a Todd Monken game because he is going to be able to maneuver and make and put in specific packages however he sees fit. So if it's still windy, you can add 2 tight ends in that regard. If you don't feel like comfortable, passing the ball, you can run the ball, have your 2 tight ends out there, get some play action in, and who's going to cover Mark Andrews? I mean, again, I know their front seven is good, but Mark Andrews is still Mark Andrews, very much so. If you feel like that you're not really going to be able to move the ball down the field, I do think that Zay is where this comes in because we know that they love those plays to try to get Zay the ball in the flat and try to make a man miss. So then that's perfect because you're not necessarily throwing the ball deep downfield because Zay is so elusive. You can kind of give it to him in short yardage, intermediates, longs, whatever. It doesn't matter. If you are able to move the ball, if it's not as windy, like you said, now you have the vertical threat. And as long as the offensive line finds a way to hold up, which you could still utilize 2 tight end sets in that regard, right? Or you can use Pat Ricard to come in as a 6th blocker to help you in that move. Then you can still move the ball because like you said, if you can protect Lamar, the defensive backfield for them, then it becomes murky because you're going to pick the Ravens and their pass catchers against their defensive backs any day of the week. Once you can get past that front seven, I think it's I don't want to say food season. I don't want to go that far. I don't want to be disrespectful, but you get my point. It really is making sure that you keep 8 upright and that you keep him comfortable in the pocket. And again, you can really utilize that in different ways depending on the weather. And I do think that that's the advantage that the Ravens have that the Colts don't have now that we assume Anthony Richardson is not going to play. They become more limited, but the Ravens have so many different weapons and so many different formations that they can use based on how they feel like it is outside that it will keep them on the field longer, obviously, and they can move the chains. So it'll be interesting to see how they figure out, well, what are we going to do in this situation and how they predict themselves based on the weather outside. But I absolutely think that the Ravens are in a much better position to move based on, oh, is it raining? Oh, is it sunny? Oh, is it windy? As opposed to what the Indianapolis Colts can do. They are very limited in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, and it will be key to see, and you see the graphic right there. I mean, the Colts, they're the top-rated run defense according to PFF, and I don't treat PFF as law because we usually disagree. I usually disagree with a lot of the stuff they put out there. But that I can kind of support that. And we know the Ravens want to run the ball. I know this is Todd Monken and not Greg Roman, but they both like to run the football. Todd Monken wants to run the ball, and the Ravens they're usually able to run the ball no matter who they play. So it will be curious to see if the Colts can make the Ravens one-dimensional. I don't think they will be able to, just because the Ravens have too many rushing threats. Lamar himself can open it up. and then that'll open it up for guys. I mean, Gus Edwards doesn't need much space. He's going to get 6 yards pretty much every time he touches the ball. Justice Hill, like you said, it seems like he'll be okay. Talk to Gus Edwards in the locker room on Wednesday, and he pretty much said the same thing, that he thinks Justice will be fine.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. But I think the Ravens will be able to run the ball. Probably not run as well as they did against Cincinnati last week. But I think they'll be able to run the ball just enough to keep the Colts on their toes and not allow themselves to become one-dimensional.
I agree with that. And again, they have the pass catchers. We got and Odell, we have to assume might not play on Sunday. And again, like I told you before on a previous episode, this is the first time where a wide receiver went down and you don't feel stress about that, right? Because they're so deep right now in wide receiver. You still got Nelson Aguilar, who had a great game against the Bengals on Sunday. And of course, we can't forget Rashad Bateman as well. So if they do have the weaponry to make this move, hey, the running the ball ain't gonna work. Okay, let's get some play action going. You know what I mean? And so it'll be interesting to see. I would love to see more Isaiah Likely too in this game if the running the ball situation is not going to work, because then you can potentially open up play action using 2 tight end sets, pretending that you're going to try to run the ball using power, and then have Isaiah Likely come in and get some shots, because we know that Mark Andrews is going to be a guy that teams are going to focus on, right? So it'll be interesting to see, but I definitely think that this is a game that Todd Monken, this is the game that we're going to be like, all right, what is really going on? Because the weather is going to dictate how they're going to want to move in this game. And I think that there is much more versatility with this offensive scheme that the Ravens have seen in years past. So it will be fun to see how he maneuvers and do these things. This is a new territory for Ravens fans. We could definitely predict in years past how this was going to go.
Yeah.
Now you're not so sure how this is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what it looks like. I'm excited to see if this offense can build off of the really good game in Cincinnati last week. I mean, Lamar was so sharp. I thought it was one of his better games that he's had recently. And to be able to see the ball spread around the way that it was, and like you said, for a key guy, and I asked Harbaugh about this on Monday, the fact is this kind of what they expected when they revamped the wide receiver room this offseason. Not only the ability to spread the ball around to all these guys, but to be able to take some injuries to key guys and keep going, to not kind of be scraping the bottom of the barrel at that point. I think they're in good shape, and thankfully it seems like Beckham's injury isn't too severe. So yeah, we'll see if the Ravens can stack consecutive good offensive performances.
I am 2-0. And I'm going to brag about it. Cordell is 1-1. That's okay. You can right the ship this week, Cordell, with your predictions. Yeah. And the Ravens are 7.5 favorites at home to win this game. Again, we don't know if Anthony Richardson is going to play, but we have to assume that it is a very good possibility he will not be playing on Sunday, which means that Gardner Minshew more than likely will get the start. Ravens lost Adarius Washington in from last week's game, apparently with a chest injury, so he is on injury reserve. So they are down 1 defensive back. Just got to note that to see how Cordell wants to play this out. So Ravens this week, Colts this week. What you doing? The old Baltimore team versus the new Baltimore team. Which one we got going on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even going to overthink this. The Ravens are 7.5 point favorites. I see no reason why they can't cover that against the Colts. The Colts do present challenges for sure, and the Ravens can get into that mode. For whatever reason, it seems to happen more at home, where they kind of play with their food a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if this game is closer than it should be.
Yep.
But I will say that the Ravens end up covering. I think they end up winning 27-13.
All right. I am actually not picking the Ravens to cover. Because they are 7.5 favorites, I am picking the Ravens to win, but I'm only picking them to win by a touchdown. I think that the weather element is going to definitely play a part. My concern is that as the game goes on, and if the weather loosens up and lightens up, do the Colts start feeling the pressure and starting to play some hurry up, which could be concerning, and they might start moving the ball down the field. And so I am saying that the Ravens are going to win this game 27-20, which means that they won't be covering the 7.5. But 27-20 does cover the over for 45. Mm-hmm. So I'll give them the over, but I'm not giving them to cover. So I believe, Cordell believes, Ravens going 3-0 into their next division rival next week. They really could use it. They could use all the cushion that they need going into the next two games because, of course, both games are going to be against AFC North opponents. So it will be interesting to see. So Cordell's going to right the ship hopefully this week. Hopefully I can continue my streak to 3-0 as the Ravens are pushing for their 3-0 streak. We'll see how that goes. Anything else you want to add before we go, Cordell?
I mean, not really. You just, you go into this game, it looks like it should, like it's a sure win for the Ravens, but this is why they play the games.
Yep.
You just never know. And the Colts, they have their issues going on. I'm not going to sit here and try to dress it up like the Colts are one of the better teams in the AFC or the league for that matter. They're not. But it's a lot of new. It's a lot of new over there, and new in the NFL can be dangerous. It can be very dangerous. And I think Anthony Richardson potentially not playing in this game helps the Ravens.
Yeah.
Because I've heard people that say, well, look, I'd rather face the rookie quarterback. And I can understand that for sure, especially considering the Ravens' success against rookie quarterbacks. But I've said it before, rookie mobile quarterbacks scare the death out of me. So I would not really want to deal with him, especially if you're going to be down Oweh. You're already down Marcus Williams. You're down Marlon Humphrey. A mobile quarterback like that gets to breaking out of the pocket, and now you got broken coverages down the field and stuff. I just don't want to deal with that. And Minshew's got some mobility with him too. Not like Anthony Richardson, but he can move. He's not a statue back there. But I do think that this is a game that the Ravens can win. Hopefully, it doesn't turn out like the Texans game where they get the win, but they're losing bodies. You want to try to stay as healthy as you can because, like you said, you've got 2 division games coming up. And then even after that, the Titans are kind of one of their low-key rivals, and those games are just as physical as AFC North matchups. So, you got to stay healthy. That's the name of the game. It's great to get these wins, but you just hope that they can remain as healthy as possible.
I completely agree with you. So Cordell and I both have the Ravens winning on Sunday to improve their record to 3-0. And on Sunday, of course, we will give our quick recap after the game about the Ravens' hopeful win against the Indianapolis Colts. And of course, look, for the city, you gotta win against the Colts in the city. I mean, this city has been abused by Peyton Manning for so long. Mm-hmm. You just got to find a way to win because there's some older people that's still very salty about what happened back in March of 1984. So they got to win for those guys, hopefully, and they'll come out with 3-0. And again, we'll talk to you guys on Sunday and recap the game. So thank you all for listening. From Cordell to me, this is Winning Drive.